My name is Charles, and for 40 years I was a United States Forest Ranger. I know these woods better than I know the back of my own hand. I've seen wildfires that could swallow a town, blizzards that buried cabins whole, and bears that could peel a car door open like a tin can. I thought I'd seen everything this wilderness had to offer. I was wrong. There's a reason I retired early. There's a reason I don't go deep into the timber anymore. It's a memory I've kept locked away for 30 years, but it's a heavy thing to carry alone. Maybe talking about it will make it lighter. I doubt it. It happened in late October. The air had that sharp, clean bite to it, and the leaves were a riot of gold and red. I was on a solo patrol, checking boundary markers in a section of the forest that was rarely visited, miles from any designated trail. It was quiet, too quiet. You get used to the constant hum of the woods, the birds, the squirrels, the wind in the pines. But that day, it was like the whole forest was holding its breath. The silence was so deep it felt like a pressure against my eardrums. I remember the smell most clearly. It wasn't the usual scent of damp earth and pine needles. It was something else. A heavy, musky odor, like a wet dog mixed with something rotten and something wild I couldn't place. It clung to the air, thick and unpleasant. I dismissed it at first, probably a dead deer or a bear's den nearby. I kept walking, my boots crunching on the fallen leaves. But the feeling of being watched started to creep up my spine. It's a primal instinct, something you can't ignore. Every time I stopped, the silence would roar back in. I'd scan the trees, seeing nothing but a sea of bark and shadow. Still, the feeling persisted. I felt small, like an intruder. I found a series of tracks that made me stop dead. They were huge, shaped like a human foot but easily twice the size, pressed deep into the soft earth near a creek bed. There were no claw marks. A bear's print is unmistakable. This was not a bear. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I was a ranger. I was supposed to be rational. There's an explanation for everything, I told myself. A prank, maybe. Some local kids with fake feet strapped to their boots. But who would come this far out? For what? I followed the tracks for about 50 yards until they disappeared onto hard, rocky ground. The musky smell was stronger here. I looked up and saw something that made the blood drain from my face. About 20 feet up, a massive oak tree, 3 thick branches, each as wide as my thigh, had been snapped clean off and twisted together into a strange, nest-like symbol. No storm could do that. No animal I knew of had the strength or dexterity. That's when I heard it. It wasn't a roar or a growl. It was a low, guttural sound, a deep vibration that seemed to come from the earth itself. It was a sound of immense power and deep sadness. It was a warning. I froze, my hand hovering over the pistol on my hip, though I knew it would be useless. Slowly, I turned toward the sound, and there it was. Standing between 2 ancient sequoias, partially cloaked in shadow, was a figure. It was tall, at least 8 feet, covered in dark, matted hair. It wasn't a man in a suit. The way it moved, a slight sway, was too fluid, too natural. Its arms were long, its shoulders impossibly broad. It just stood there, watching me. I couldn't see its face clearly, just 2 dark, deep-set eyes that seemed to hold an ancient intelligence. There was no malice in them, no aggression, but there was a profound sense of otherness. It was a creature of the wilderness, a part of the forest that man was never meant to see. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only 30 seconds. The world had shrunk to just the 2 of us. The silent woods, the strange smell, and this impossible being. I didn't feel fear in the way you do with a bear. This was a different kind of terror. It was the fear of the unknown, the shattering of my entire understanding of the world. It took 1 step back, melting into the shadows as silently as it had appeared. One moment it was there, a solid, breathing giant. The next, it was gone, just gone. The forest was empty again, but it felt different. It felt older, deeper, and full of secrets I could never comprehend. I didn't run. I walked slowly and deliberately back the way I came. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see it again. When I got to my truck, my hands were shaking so violently I could barely fit the key in the ignition. I never filed a report. Who would have believed me? They would have said I was crazy or drunk. They would have laughed me out of the service. So I kept it to myself. But that day changed me. I was never truly comfortable in the deep woods again. I always felt like I was being watched, like I was a guest in a place where I didn't belong. That creature didn't hurt me. It didn't even threaten me. It just showed me that the world is bigger and far stranger than we think, and that some places, some things are best left alone. That's a heavy truth to live with. I drove for at least an hour on autopilot, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The familiar dirt roads I'd traveled 1,000 times suddenly felt alien, like I was in a foreign country. Every dark patch between the trees held a shape, a shadow that could be it. The setting sun cast long, distorted figures across the road, and my heart leaped at everyone. The radio was off. The silence in the truck cab was almost as deafening as the silence in the woods had been, but it was a different kind. This was the absence of sound. That had been the presence of something holding its breath. I got back to the ranger station just after dusk. My colleague, a good man named Norman who was near retirement himself, was locking up. He saw my truck pull in and waited for me by the door. "Everything all right, Charles?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to form a reply, something normal, something routine, but the words wouldn't come. My throat was tight and I could still smell that thick, musky odor in my memory. I just nodded, grabbing my pack from the passenger seat. I couldn't look him in the eye. I felt like if I did, he would see it all, see the absolute shattering of my world reflected in them. "Long day," I managed to choke out. It was the biggest lie I'd ever told. He clapped me on the shoulder. "Well, get home. Your wife's probably holding dinner." I nodded again and walked to my personal truck, feeling his eyes on my back. He knew something was wrong, but he was the kind of man who wouldn't push. I was grateful for that. If he had asked me one more time, I think I might have broken down right there in the gravel parking lot. The drive home was worse. Now I was back in civilization with streetlights and other cars, but the feeling of being an alien persisted. The world I had lived in for 40 years, the world of maps and rules and known species, had been a comfortable illusion. That illusion was gone. I had seen behind the curtain. When I got home, the lights were on, and the smell of stew filled the air. It was a scene of perfect domestic safety. My wife, bless her heart, met me at the door. She took one look at my face and her smile faded. "What is it? What happened?" I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to unload this unbearable weight onto someone else, to have her tell me I was crazy or that I'd imagined it. But how could I? How could I bring that thing into our home? How could I describe the depth of those eyes, the impossible strength in that form, the soul-shaking sound that was less a noise and more a feeling? It was a sound of ancient loneliness. That's what I finally decided it was. Not anger, not a threat, but a profound, bottomless sorrow. It was the sound of a being that knows it is the last of its kind. Just a run-in with a bear. I lied again. A big one. Spooked me is all. She accepted it, though I could tell she didn't fully believe it. She knew me too well. She knew my relationship with bears. I respected them, I was cautious, but I was never scared of them. Not like this. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that clearing. I saw the twisted branches. I felt the pressure of the silence, and I saw that dark figure watching me from the shadows. It wasn't a nightmare. It was a memory, playing on a loop. It wasn't the fear that kept me awake. It was the realization that it had let me go. It had the power to do anything it wanted to me. I was helpless, a child in its world, but it chose to just watch and then to leave. Why? Was it curiosity, or was it pity? That thought was almost more terrifying than if it had been aggressive. The idea that this creature, this thing that shouldn't exist, looked at me and felt pity. I got up before dawn and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. I didn't drink. I watched the sun come up, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, just like any other sunrise, but for me it was different. It was the sunrise on a new world, a world that was wilder, deeper, and infinitely more mysterious than I had ever imagined, and I was utterly alone in it. I knew right then that I would carry this secret to my grave. It was too big, too strange. Telling people would only invite ridicule and disbelief. It would accomplish nothing but brand me as a lunatic. The secret became a part of me, a cold, heavy stone in my gut that I've carried every day for 30 years. It's why I took early retirement a few years later. I couldn't do the job anymore. I couldn't walk into the deep woods and pretend I was the one in charge, the one who knew the land. I knew with absolute certainty that I was just a visitor, and I knew I wasn't always welcome. The days that followed were a blur of forced normalcy. I went to work. I answered the phone. I filled out patrol logs, carefully omitting the last, most important part of my final route. Each stroke of the pen felt like a lie. I was building a wall of routine around the gaping hole that had opened in my reality. At home, my wife Susan watched me with worried eyes. She tried to talk to me, asking about my day, but my answers were short, empty. The secret was a physical presence between us, sitting at the dinner table, lying in our bed. It was a cold, silent guest in our home. "You're not sleeping, Charles," she said one night, her voice soft in the darkness. "You toss and turn. Sometimes you make these little noises." "Bad dreams," I mumbled, turning away from her. It wasn't a dream. It was a memory that had burned itself onto the inside of my eyelids. At the station, I became an expert in avoidance. My father, who had been a logger his whole life, always said the woods have secrets and a wise man doesn't ask for them. I had never understood what he meant until now. I'd always been the man who went deeper, who sought out the quietest, most remote corners of the wilderness. Now, those places terrified me. I volunteered for paperwork. I offered to handle equipment maintenance. I found any excuse I could to stay within the reassuring confines of the ranger station's four walls. Norman knew. He never said a word, but I could feel his knowing gaze on me. One afternoon, he found me staring out the window, looking at the dark line of trees that marked the edge of the forest. "Big storm coming in from the west," he said, standing beside me. "Gonna be a wet one." I just nodded. "Sometimes," he continued, his voice low, "this place shows you something you ain't ready for. Something that don't fit on a map." He took a slow sip of his coffee. "It's not your job to understand everything, Charles. It's just your job to respect it." He walked away, leaving me with his words. Did he know? Had he seen something too? I never asked, and he never offered more. It was an unspoken understanding between two old men of the woods. A shared acknowledgement that there were lines you didn't cross and questions you didn't ask. His words were a kindness, a small raft in the ocean of my isolation, but they weren't enough to save me. The breaking point came about a year later. A family of hikers had gone missing. They were inexperienced, had wandered off the main trail, and a sudden snowstorm had trapped them. The search area was exactly where I had my encounter. Section 17, the deep timber. My stomach turned to ice when the captain read out the coordinates. I had no choice. I was the most experienced ranger. I knew that terrain better than anyone, or at least I used to. Gearing up felt different this time. The weight of my pack, usually a comfort, felt like a burden. The cold steel of the emergency flare gun felt flimsy and useless. As we drove out, the familiar rumble of the truck did nothing to soothe the frantic drumming in my chest. The forest looked the same, but it felt different. Every shadow was deeper. Every tree seemed to lean in, whispering. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy with unspoken threats. We split up to cover more ground. I was paired with a younger ranger, a kid named Gregory, full of confidence and textbook knowledge. As we pushed deeper into the woods, the trees grew thicker, blocking out the sun. The air grew cold and still. Then I smelled it. Faint at first, but unmistakable. That same heavy, musky odor of rot and wildness. My blood ran cold. "You smell that?" Gregory asked, wrinkling his nose. "Must be a winter kill nearby. A big one." I didn't answer. My eyes were scanning the trees, my hand instinctively moving toward my sidearm. The feeling of being watched returned, 1,000 times stronger than before. It was a physical pressure, an ancient and powerful gaze that pinned me to the spot. I saw a flicker of movement in the periphery, a large dark shape moving between the trees with impossible speed and silence. It was gone before I could even register it. "Charles, you okay?" Gregory's voice sounded distant. I couldn't breathe. My heart was a wild animal trying to claw its way out of my chest. I saw the twisted branches in my mind, the giant footprint, the deep, sorrowful eyes. It was here. It knew we were here. It was watching us. I had led this boy into its territory. My father's words echoed in my head, a frantic warning. A wise man doesn't ask for them. "We have to go back," I said, my voice a ragged whisper. "What? We can't. The family. Now!" I yelled, the sound raw and panicked. I grabbed his arm and started pulling him back the way we came. I didn't care about protocol. I didn't care about the mission. All I cared about was getting out of those woods, getting away from that ancient, lonely power that resided there. We made it back to the staging area. I gave some excuse about the weather turning, about a gut feeling. They looked at me like I was crazy. I was the legendary Ranger Charles, the man who never turned back. But I had. The family was found the next day by another team, huddled but alive, miles from where we were. They said they had gotten turned around after hearing a series of strange, deep calls that scared them into running in the wrong direction. I put in my papers for early retirement the following week. My superiors were shocked. They offered me a desk job, a promotion. I refused. I couldn't even stand to look at the forest from a window anymore. It was no longer a place of solace for me. It was a place of secrets, a place where a line had been drawn. I had crossed it once, and I had been allowed to leave. I knew I would not be given a second chance. The wilderness had shown me its heart, and in doing so, it had taken a piece of mine. It was a piece I would never get back. Retirement wasn't a celebration. It was a surrender. There was no party, no gold watch, just a quiet signing of papers and a final, awkward handshake with the station chief. I packed my locker into a single cardboard box. 40 years of my life. A worn-out compass, a collection of faded maps, a chipped thermos, it all fit into one small box. Driving away from the ranger station for the last time felt like a piece of my soul was being torn out. I had defined myself by that uniform, by that duty. I was Charles, the ranger. Now, I was just Charles. The title felt hollow, incomplete. The first few months were the worst. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. out of habit, my body ready for the cold morning air and the familiar weight of my pack. But there was nowhere to go. I'd sit in the kitchen, watching the sun rise over the houses across the street, feeling a profound and unsettling stillness. The world had kept moving, but I was stuck. Susan tried her best. She suggested projects, hobbies, trips. We could finally go see the Grand Canyon, she'd say, her voice full of forced cheerfulness. I'd just shake my head. The thought of standing at the edge of another great wild space filled me with a quiet dread. Our home, once a sanctuary from the wilderness, became my cage. The silence in the house was different from the silence of the woods. It wasn't alive. It was empty, and it amplified the memories I was trying so desperately to suppress. One afternoon, Susan came into the living room where I was just staring out the window. "It's a beautiful day," she said, touching my shoulder. "Let's take a walk. Just down to the little park by the river. Get some fresh air." I flinched. My reaction was involuntary, a sharp intake of breath and a stiffening of my entire body. The idea of being surrounded by trees, even manicured park trees, made my skin crawl. I saw her face fall, a mixture of hurt and confusion. "I'm just tired," I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She pulled her hand away and walked out of the room without another word. The secret was no longer just mine. It was a poison seeping into the foundations of our marriage. I started spending my time in the garage, taking up woodworking. I found a strange comfort in it. I could take a rough piece of timber and shape it, sand it, force it to my will. It was controlled. It was predictable. I built birdhouses, bookshelves, a new kitchen table for Susan. My hands were always busy, but my mind was never quiet. Every time I smelled the fresh-cut pine, I was transported back to that clearing. I'd see the snapped branches, smell that musky rot, feel those ancient eyes on me. Sometimes the memories were so vivid I'd drop a tool, my hands suddenly shaking too much to hold it. One evening, I was in the grocery store picking up milk. As I stood in the checkout line, my eyes fell on the rack of tabloids. On the cover of one was a grainy, black and white photo of a tall, hairy figure striding through some woods. The headline screamed, "Bigfoot terrorizes campers in Oregon." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. My heart began to pound in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was a cold, sickening anger. They treated it like a monster from a cheap movie, a sideshow freak. They didn't understand. They couldn't possibly understand the immense, sorrowful intelligence in those eyes, the sheer otherness of its presence. It wasn't a monster. It was something else, something that didn't belong in their world of headlines and hoaxes. It belonged to the deep woods, to the silence. I paid for the milk and left, the image from the magazine burned into my mind. That night, I sat in the dark garage long after Susan had gone to bed. I thought about my father, the logger. I remembered him coming home after a long week in the timber, smelling of sawdust and pine sap. He didn't talk much about his work, but one thing he said always stuck with me. "The woods have secrets, Charles," he told me once, his voice low and serious, "and a wise man doesn't ask for them." I had spent my whole life asking, pushing deeper, wanting to know every trail and every creek. I had been arrogant. I thought because I had a map, I understood the territory. I realized then that I had stumbled upon one of those secrets my father talked about. It had been shown to me, and instead of respecting it, I had run from it. The years began to blur together. I grew older. My hair turned from gray to white. Susan and I found a new, quieter rhythm, an unspoken agreement not to talk about the man I used to be. The secret settled deep inside me, a cold, hard knot of memory that never dissolved. I avoided my old colleagues. If I saw a Forest Service truck in town, I'd turn down a different street. I couldn't face their questions. The inevitable, "Why'd you really leave, Charles?" How could I explain that I, the veteran ranger who had faced down fires and blizzards, had been defeated by a single silent look? How could I tell them that the wilderness I had loved and protected had shown me that I was, and always had been, a trespasser? It was a truth too heavy to share, a memory that had to be carried alone. And for 30 years, that's exactly what I did. But telling it, even to the silence of these four walls, hasn't made it lighter. It's just given it shape. For 30 years, it was a formless weight in my gut. Now it has a voice. My voice. And it's hungrier than I ever imagined. My life became a series of carefully constructed walls to keep the wilderness out. I sold my truck, the one with the heavy-duty winch and the rifle rack. I bought a sensible sedan that had never seen a gravel road. We moved from our small house on the edge of the national forest into a subdivision in town, where the wildest thing you'd see was a raccoon tipping over a garbage can. The trees here were ornamental, disciplined things planted in neat rows, their branches trimmed so they wouldn't dare touch the power lines. They were nothing like the ancient, tangled chaos of the woods I once called home. One day, a few years into my retirement, a man named Frank called me. He'd been a younger ranger back then, eager and full of questions. We'd worked a few search and rescues together. He was a good kid. His voice on the phone was the same, just a little deeper, a little weathered by time. He said there was going to be a reunion for some of the old-timers, a barbecue at a park downtown. He wanted to know if I'd be there. "Everyone asks about you, Charles," he said, his tone warm with nostalgia. "They tell stories about you like you're a legend, the man who could track a ghost through a snowstorm." I felt my hand tighten on the receiver. The plastic creaked. A legend. I was a fraud. I was the man who ran. "I don't do that sort of thing anymore, Frank," I said, my voice sounding distant and unfamiliar even to me. There was a pause. "You okay, Charles?" he asked, the warmth replaced by a flicker of concern. "You sound far away." "I'm fine. Just busy," I lied, another lie to add to the pile that had become my life. After I hung up, Susan came into the kitchen. She had that look on her face, the one she got when she was trying to read the pages of a book that had been glued shut. "Was that Frank?" she asked softly. I nodded, staring at the linoleum floor pattern. "They're having a get-together for the old rangers." She put her hand on my arm. Her touch was light, tentative. "You should go, honey. It would do you good to see them." I pulled my arm away, not roughly, but with a finality that was just as sharp. "I don't want to see them," I said. The words were clipped, cold. I saw the hurt flash in her eyes before she could hide it. "Why not?" she whispered. "They were your friends. They were your life." How could I tell her? How could I explain that looking at their faces would be like looking into a mirror of the man I was supposed to be, the man I failed to be? They would want to talk about the woods, about the calls, about the wild. They would want to reminisce about the very thing that broke me. My father's words came back to me then, as they so often did in the quiet, empty hours of my retirement. "The woods have secrets, Charles," he'd said, his hands stained with pine resin, "and a wise man doesn't ask for them." Frank was asking. Susan was asking. They were asking for the biggest secret of all, the one that had hollowed me out from the inside. They wanted to know why the legend had disappeared, and I couldn't give them an answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went out to the garage, my sanctuary of sawdust and control. I ran my hand over a half-finished rocking chair I was making for our future grandchildren. The wood was smooth, predictable. I had taken its wildness and tamed it, bent it to my will. But the wildness inside me was a different story. It was a splinter, buried too deep to pull out, and it was festering. I looked at my hands under the single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. These were the hands that had helped deliver a baby in a stranded car during a blizzard. They had set the broken leg of a hiker, splinting it with branches and strips of my own shirt. They had steered a boat through rapids to rescue a drowning fisherman. They were strong, capable hands, but they had trembled uncontrollably as I gripped that young ranger's arm and fled. They had shaken so badly I could barely sign my retirement papers. The shame of it was a physical thing, a sour taste at the back of my throat that never went away. I had built a reputation for courage over 40 years, and it had been dismantled in a single afternoon by a pair of sad, ancient eyes. The world saw a hero who retired. I knew the truth. I was a coward who had deserted his post, and that was a secret far heavier than any creature hiding in the pines. The silence in our house after that conversation was a physical thing. It was heavier than any snowpack, thicker than any fog. Susan moved around me with a careful grace, as if I were a piece of delicate, cracked glass that might shatter at the slightest touch. We'd eat dinner without speaking, the only sounds the clinking of our forks against the plates. I knew she was watching me, her eyes filled with a sad, desperate confusion. She was trying to map a territory that had no landmarks, trying to understand a man she had been married to for 40 years who had suddenly become a stranger. I was a ghost in my own home, haunted by the memory of a ghost in the woods. I started staying up late, long after she had gone to bed. The house would be still, and I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop, the screen a lonely blue glow in the darkness. My fingers, which knew how to tie every survival knot imaginable, fumbled on the keyboard. I typed words I had never said aloud. Unexplained sounds in national forests, large bipedal tracks, no claws, musky odor wilderness. The results were a flood of nonsense. Grainy photos, ridiculous stories, websites with flashing banners and wild claims. It all felt cheap and insulting, a carnival sideshow built around something that had been so profoundly real, so sacred in its terror. It was like trying to describe the Grand Canyon to someone who had only ever seen a postcard. My father's words echoed in my head. A wise man doesn't ask for them, but I wasn't wise. I was broken, and I needed to know if I was the only one. I dug deeper, past the tabloid trash into forums and archives of witness testimonies. Most of it was rambling and incoherent, but every now and then I'd find a fragment that resonated. A logger in Washington who quit his job after hearing something scream like a man and a bull at the same time. A woman in Northern California who described the same oppressive silence I had felt, the feeling of the entire forest holding its breath. These were small things, splinters of a shared experience, and I clung to them. It was a lonely comfort, knowing there were other people out there who had also seen a secret and been changed by it. One night, I found a website that was different. It was stark, academic, no flashy ads. It was run by a man named Norman, a biologist who had apparently walked away from a university tenure to pursue this subject full-time. He didn't deal in speculation. He dealt in data, track castings, sound recordings, statistical analysis of sighting reports. He treated it not as a monster hunt, but as a genuine scientific mystery. For the first time, I felt a flicker of something other than fear or shame. It was a sliver of validation. I spent hours reading his articles, listening to the audio files he had collected. One of them, a recording of a long, mournful call echoing across a valley, made the hair on my arm stand up. It was different from what I had heard, but it had the same impossible depth, the same sense of ancient loneliness. I must have lost track of time. I heard a floorboard creak on the stairs. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Susan stood in the doorway of the kitchen, her robe pulled tight around her. Her face was pale in the dim light. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the closed laptop, as if it were a venomous snake on the table. "What are you doing, Charles?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a razor. "Nothing, just reading," I mumbled, the lie weak and obvious. She walked slowly to the table and stood opposite me. She didn't try to open the laptop. She just looked at me, her eyes searching my face for an answer I couldn't give. "I saw your search history the other day," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I was looking for a recipe. I saw all of it. Bigfoot, Sasquatch. What is this, Charles? What is happening to you?" The words hung in the air between us, ugly and exposed. This was it. The secret was no longer just a shadow in my mind. It was a sickness in our home, and she had finally given it a name. I felt a surge of defensive anger, followed immediately by a wave of crushing guilt. I saw the fear in her eyes. She didn't think I was crazy. She thought I was losing myself piece by piece, and she didn't know why. "It's nothing," I said again, my voice hoarse. "It's a stupid hobby. That's all." "A hobby?" she whispered, shaking her head. "A hobby doesn't make you flinch when I touch you." A hobby doesn't make you stare out the window for hours. A hobby doesn't turn you into this empty shell. I miss my husband, Charles. I want him back. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. I wanted to reach across the table to take her hand, to tell her everything, but the words wouldn't come. How could I tell her that her husband had died on that mountain 30 years ago? That the man who came back was just a hollowed-out replica, going through the motions of a life he no longer felt he deserved. She turned and walked back upstairs without another word. I sat there in the dark kitchen, the silence rushing back in, colder and emptier than before. I had survived the woods, but I was not surviving this. I opened the laptop again. My hands were shaking. I navigated back to Norman's website. There was a contact page, an email address. For 30 years, I had held this story inside me, a toxic secret that had corroded my life from the inside out. I had carried it alone, but seeing the pain on Susan's face, I realized I wasn't the only one carrying it. She was carrying it too, in the form of my absence, my distance, my fear. I couldn't tell her, but maybe, just maybe, I could tell a stranger. I opened a new email. The cursor blinked on the blank page, a tiny rhythmic heartbeat in the overwhelming silence. And for the first time, I began to write. I typed for what felt like hours, my fingers stiff and clumsy. The story spilled out of me in a torrent of disjointed sentences and raw memories. I wrote about the silence, the smell, the impossible size of the tracks. I wrote about the feeling of being watched, a pressure so intense it felt like the forest itself was squeezing the air from my lungs. I described the young ranger, his face a mask of terror, and the shame that had been my constant companion ever since. I didn't try to make it sound credible or sane. I just wrote the truth as it had lived inside me for 3 decades. I read it over once. It was the testament of a broken man. My hand hovered over the mouse, my index finger trembling just above the send button. My father's warning felt like a physical presence in the room. The woods have secrets, Charles, and a wise man doesn't ask for them. I wasn't a wise man anymore. I was just an old one, tired of carrying the weight alone. I closed my eyes and clicked. The sound was tiny, insignificant, but it echoed in the silent kitchen like a gunshot. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, a profound emptiness settled over me. I had expected relief, a sense of release. Instead, I felt horribly exposed, as if I had just stripped naked in the middle of a crowded street. My secret, the thing that had defined and deformed my life, was no longer mine alone. It was out there, traveling through wires and servers, on its way to a stranger named Norman. I imagined him reading it, a biologist with a PhD, shaking his head with clinical pity at the ramblings of a lonely old man. The shame I had felt on that mountain came rushing back fresh and sharp. I had run then, and I felt like running now. I slammed the laptop shut again and went to the sink, splashing cold water on my face, but the feeling wouldn't wash away. The next few days were the longest of my life. I became a prisoner to my email inbox. I'd check it a dozen times before breakfast, my heart leaping at every notification only to sink when it was just a coupon for a hardware store or a newsletter I'd forgotten to unsubscribe from. I carried my phone with me from room to room. The silence from Norman was a loud and constant accusation. I had confessed my deepest trauma to the void. Susan watched me, her expression a mixture of worry and hurt. The small talk we used to make, the comfortable routines we had built over a lifetime, they all felt like a lie. The real conversation was the one we weren't having, and its absence was suffocating. "You're waiting for something," she said one evening. We were on the porch watching the sun set behind the neighbor's perfectly manicured oak tree. The sky was a blaze of orange and purple. It used to be my favorite time of day. Now, the beauty just felt like a mockery. "I'm not waiting for anything," I lied, my eyes fixed on my phone screen. "Yes, you are," she insisted, her voice gentle but firm. "You look like you did when our son was overseas, checking for news every 5 minutes, scared of what you might find, but more scared of finding nothing at all. Whatever it is, Charles, you can tell me." I looked at her then, at the deep lines of concern etched around her eyes. She deserved the truth. She deserved a whole husband, not the fractured man I had become. But I couldn't form the words. Telling Norman, a faceless name on a website, had felt like lancing a wound. Telling Susan felt like poisoning her. So I just shook my head, breaking her gaze. "It's nothing, honey. Just old age making me jumpy." I saw her shoulders slump. Another wall built between us, brick by painful brick. On the 5th day, I had given up. I had been a fool. I had taken the most sacred, terrifying moment of my life and turned it into junk mail. I was in the garage, sanding the arm of the rocking chair, trying to lose myself in the simple, repetitive motion. The smell of sawdust was clean, honest. I was trying to convince myself to delete my email account, to bury the secret again, this time for good. My phone buzzed in my pocket. My hands were covered in fine wood dust. I ignored it. It buzzed again. With a sigh of irritation, I pulled it out, ready to delete another advertisement. But the notification on the screen wasn't from a store. It was from my email. The sender's name was just one word: Norman. My breath caught in my throat. My hand started to shake, and a fine powder of sawdust drifted from my fingers onto the phone screen. I wiped it away frantically. The subject line was as simple and direct as the sender's name. It read, Your account from the National Forest. I stood there for a long moment, the electric sander still humming in my other hand. The sound seemed to come from a great distance. The whole world had shrunk to the size of that small glowing screen. 30 years of silence had led to this. I turned off the sander, plunging the garage into a sudden heavy quiet. With a thumb that felt clumsy and foreign, I tapped the screen and opened the email. The email was short, just a few paragraphs. It was written in a clean academic font, the kind you see in scientific papers. There was no greeting, no "Dear Charles." It just began. "Mr. Charles," it started. "Thank you for your correspondence. I receive hundreds of accounts a week. Most are easily dismissed. Yours is not. Several data points in your testimony are of significant interest. First, the specific geographic area you mentioned has a low-level but persistent history of sightings that fit a particular typology. Second, your detailed description of the oppressive silence preceding the encounter is a recurring environmental marker in what I consider Class A reports. Third, the musky odor combined with the absence of claw marks on the tracks is consistent with the most credible castings we have on file. Your timeline also corresponds with a period of unusual animal migration patterns we have retroactively mapped in that region. I understand this event has been a significant burden. If you are willing, I would like to schedule a phone call to discuss your account in greater detail. My work depends on first-person testimonies from reliable observers. Your background as a forest ranger makes your input invaluable. Sincerely, Norman." I read it again and again, 5 times, 10 times. The words blurred. My legs felt weak and I leaned back against my workbench, the splintery wood pressing into my back. I wasn't crazy. The thought didn't come as a triumphant shout in my mind. It landed softly, like a snowflake on water, and then melted into a cold, terrifying reality. For 30 years I had lived with the possibility that the foundations of my own mind were cracked, that I had hallucinated or misremembered, or that the stress of the job had simply broken something inside me. I had held 2 conflicting truths in my head: the absolute certainty of what I saw, and the absolute certainty that it was impossible. Now, here was a man, a scientist, telling me that my personal horror story was a data point, that my trauma fit a typology. A strange feeling, a hybrid of vindication and profound dread washed over me. It was one thing to carry a secret. It was another thing entirely to have that secret looked at under a microscope. The email validated my experience, but it also stripped it of its mythical terror. It turned the monster in my memory into a specimen. Invaluable input, reliable observer. These weren't the words of a fellow believer sharing ghost stories around a campfire. They were the words of a researcher collecting a sample. He wasn't offering comfort, he was offering a classification. And somehow that was even more unsettling. I walked out of the garage and into the fading afternoon light. The world looked different, sharper. The neighbor's oak tree wasn't just a tree, it was a habitat, an ecosystem. The wind wasn't just wind, it was an atmospheric current carrying scents and sounds. My ranger training, the part of my brain that observed and cataloged, had been dormant for years, buried under a thick layer of fear. Now it felt like it was cautiously waking up. Norman's email had given me permission to be who I used to be, an observer. I found Susan in the garden, tending to her roses. She looked up as I approached, her brow furrowed with the familiar worry she always wore when she looked at me lately. "Dinner will be ready in an hour," she said, her voice gentle. She was waiting for me to grunt an affirmation and walk past, but I stopped. I looked at the rose bush she was pruning. A Japanese beetle was chewing on a leaf, its iridescent green shell shimmering in the sun. "You've got an infestation starting," I said. My voice sounded rusty, unused. She blinked, surprised. "Oh, I hadn't noticed. You need to treat it now before they lay eggs," I continued, pointing. "See the way the leaf is skeletonized? That's the telltale sign." She stared at me, her pruning shears held motionless in her hand. She wasn't looking at the beetle. She was looking at me. I was present. I was here, in the garden with her, talking about bugs on a rose bush. It was the most normal conversation we'd had in months. A small, fragile smile touched her lips. "Okay, Ranger," she said softly. "What do you recommend?" That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word of Norman's email. Susan slept beside me, her breathing deep and even. For the first time in a long time, she had fallen asleep, holding my hand. My small moment of lucidity in the garden had been a gift to her, a sign that her husband was still in there somewhere. But it felt like a deception, because while a part of me had returned to the present, the rest of me was back on that mountain 30 years ago. Only this time I wasn't alone. Norman was there with me, holding a clipboard and a pen, asking me to describe the exact shade of color in the creature's eyes. I would like to schedule a phone call. The request echoed in the quiet room. It was an invitation to open a door I had nailed shut and barricaded with 3 decades of denial. Talking to him meant reliving it, not as a fragmented nightmare, but as a sequence of events. It meant describing the young ranger, the one who had died of a heart attack, and my role in that. It meant giving voice to the deep, guttural sound that had frozen the blood in my veins. It meant admitting out loud that I had run, that I had abandoned a man, that I had failed in my duty, all because of something my mind still screamed was impossible. I slipped out of bed and went downstairs to the kitchen. The moon cast long shadows across the floor. I opened my laptop. The email from Norman was still on the screen. My secret had been a poison that had slowly sickened my life, my marriage. But maybe, just maybe, talking about it was the antidote. It was a terrifying hope. I looked at his name, a stranger who now knew more about me than my own wife. He didn't want my fear or my guilt. He just wanted the data. Maybe that was what I needed, to have the memory cut out of me piece by piece with the cold, clean precision of a surgeon. My hand shook as I typed a reply. It was only 2 words. "I'm ready." The reply came less than an hour later. It was just as brief. "Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Is this acceptable?" There was a phone number at the bottom. No name, no title, just the number. It felt less like a question and more like an appointment summons. I wrote back a single word: acceptable. I felt like a man agreeing to the terms of his own interrogation. I didn't tell Susan. I let her believe the peace she saw in the garden was a permanent change, a fever that had finally broken. We ate dinner together and the conversation was light, easy. We talked about the leaking faucet in the guest bathroom and the squirrels that were getting into her bird feeder again. It felt normal. It felt like a complete and utter fraud. The next day, the hours leading up to 2 p.m. stretched into an eternity. I couldn't sit still. I paced the house, picking things up and putting them down without purpose. At 1:45, I went out to the garage and closed the big roll-up door, shutting out the bright afternoon sun. The air inside was cool and smelled of oil and old wood. This was my space, my sanctuary. But today, it felt like a bunker. I sat on my workbench, the same one I'd leaned against after reading his first email. I placed my phone on the smooth, worn wood in front of me, right next to a jar of rusty screws. I stared at the black screen, watching the seconds tick by on the digital clock. 1:58, 1:59. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Precisely as the clock turned to 2, the phone buzzed, the vibration loud against the wood. The screen lit up with the number from the email, an unknown caller. I took a deep breath, my hand shaking as I swiped to answer. I put it on speakerphone and set it back on the bench. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a voice, calm and measured, spoke from the small device. "Is this Charles?" The voice was flat, without any discernible accent. It was the voice of a man who spent his life listening, not talking. "Yes," I managed to say. My own voice sounded like a stranger's. "This is Norman," he said. "Thank you for making time. I have your initial account in front of me. I record all my calls for research purposes. Do I have your consent to proceed?" "You do," I said. "Good. Let's start with the date. Your email said late October. Can you be more specific? It was October 28th, I said immediately. The date was burned into my memory. And the year? 30 years ago, that would make it 1993. I heard the faint sound of a keyboard clicking on his end. He was taking notes, turning my life's defining horror into a digital file. Your report mentions you were on a solo patrol checking boundary markers, is that correct? A lump formed in my throat. This was it. The first lie, the first omission I had carried for 3 decades. No, I said, the word tasting like rust. That's not correct. I wasn't alone. The clicking stopped. There was a pause. It was only a second, but it felt heavy. Please elaborate, Norman said, his tone unchanged. I had a rookie with me, I said, my eyes fixed on a spiderweb in the corner of the garage window. A young ranger. His name was Jack. He was 24 years old, fresh out of training. It was his first season. I could almost see him. Jack, with his goofy grin and his eagerness to prove himself. He had a picture of his high school sweetheart, now his wife, tucked into the band of his hat. He'd shown it to me that morning. She's expecting our first, he'd said, his chest puffed out with pride. A second individual complicates the account, Norman said, pulling me back to the present. Was Ranger Jack a witness to the entire event? My stomach twisted. He was a witness to the beginning of it, I said carefully. Let's start there then, Norman said, and the keyboard clicking resumed. Walk me through the day, from the morning. So I did. I started with the drive up to the trailhead, the crisp morning air, the way Jack chattered nervously about everything and nothing. I described the hike in, the colors of the leaves, the clear, sharp quality of the light, and then I described the silence. It wasn't just quiet, I explained, trying to find the right words. I've spent my whole life in the woods. I know quiet. This was a void, like a soundproof room had been dropped over acres of forest. No birds, no insects, not even the wind. Jack noticed it too. He stopped talking. He kept looking over his shoulder. He asked me if a storm was coming in. And what did you tell him? Norman asked. I told him no. The sky was clear. I told him it was probably just the topography, an odd pocket of still air. I was making excuses. For him, and for myself. Because I had never felt anything like it. It felt wrong. It felt heavy. Then came the smell. I described it just as I had in the email. The thick, musky odor that caught in the back of your throat. Jack thought it was a bear's winter den, I said. He wanted to get clear of the area. He was getting spooked. I should have listened to him. He was young, but his instincts were screaming. And I was the veteran, the one who was supposed to know better, telling him to calm down, that it was nothing. My voice cracked on the last word. The guilt was as fresh and raw as it was 30 years ago. I had failed him before anything had even happened. I had failed in my most basic duty, which was to listen to the forest, and to listen to the man who was my responsibility. Norman was quiet for a moment. The clicking had stopped again. I wondered if he was processing the emotion in my voice, or if he was simply waiting for the next data point. And then you found the tracks, he said, his voice a steady, unemotional anchor in my storm of memory. Tell me about the tracks, Charles. I took a breath. The air in my garage felt thin. The tracks were clean, I told Norman. That's the best word for it. Each one was a perfect impression in the damp earth by the creek. There were 5 toes, a defined arch, a heel. It looked like a man's foot. A very big man had been pressed into the ground with immense weight, but there were things wrong with it. The keyboard click started again. Wrong in what way? Norman's voice was a steady scalpel, dissecting my memory. The proportions, I said, closing my eyes, seeing the print as clearly as if it were in front of me. The width at the ball of the foot was too great, and there was no sign of a boot tread. Nothing. Just skin texture. Faint ridges like a giant fingerprint. Jack knelt down beside one. He was pale. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. What kind of person walks barefoot out here in late October, Charles? He whispered. His voice was shaking. I remember my own reaction. It was denial. A professional refusal to accept what my eyes were seeing. I told him it was probably a prank, some local kids with a mold. I didn't believe it for a second. A prankster wouldn't come this deep into the backcountry. There was no one to perform for. But I said it anyway. For him. And for me. And what was Ranger Jack's response to your explanation? Norman asked. He didn't buy it. He pointed at the stride. The distance between the prints was enormous, 7, maybe 8 feet apart. "No man can step that far," he said. He was right. And the depth, whatever made them, weighed a lot more than a man. Jack stood up and unholstered his service revolver. It was against regulations, unless there was a clear and present danger. He said he just wanted to be ready. "For what?" I asked him. He just shook his head and scanned the trees. The silence I'd described earlier had changed. It was no longer a void. It was a presence. It felt like it was listening to us. The musky smell was stronger here, near the creek, almost suffocating. It had a sharp metallic undertone now that made my teeth ache. We stood there for what felt like an hour, trapped between the impossible tracks behind us and the oppressive woods in front of us. "I made a decision," I told Norman, my voice dropping. "The worst decision of my career." I told Jack we were pushing on, that we had to finish the boundary check protocol, duty. Those were the words I used. They were shields. I was a senior ranger, and I was scared, and I couldn't admit it. I couldn't turn back because of some strange tracks. It would have been an admission of something I couldn't face. "Did you believe you were in danger?" Norman's question was direct. I didn't know what to believe, I confessed. My training, my experience, everything I knew about this forest was telling me that what I was seeing was impossible. But my gut was telling me to run. I ignored it. I told Jack to put his weapon away and we started walking again, away from the creek and deeper into the timber. We walked for another half-mile. Neither of us spoke. The only sound was the crunch of our boots on the dry leaves, and it sounded deafeningly loud in the dead quiet. Jack was walking so close behind me I could feel his breath on my neck. Every snap of a twig made us both flinch. The sun was getting lower, casting long, distorted shadows through the dense canopy of pine and fir. The air grew colder, and then we heard it. "What did you hear, Charles?" Norman asked, his keyboard falling silent. My throat tightened. Even now, in the safety of my garage, the memory of that sound made the hairs on my arms stand up. It started low, a deep rumble, almost too low to be a sound. More like a vibration I felt in my chest, through the soles of my boots. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a mountain lion. It wasn't any animal I had ever heard. I paused, trying to find the words. It was mournful, and then it rose in pitch into something that was halfway between a roar and a scream. It was filled with a power and a rage that was terrifying, but also a profound sadness. It echoed through the valley, bouncing off the ridges, and it felt like the entire world had fallen silent just to listen to it. In the memory, Jack let out a small, choked cry. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my jacket. "What was that?" he gasped. "Oh God, Charles, what was that?" I didn't have an answer for him. I stood frozen, my mind racing through every possibility and finding nothing. My ranger training was useless. My .44 Magnum felt like a child's toy. That sound wasn't just big. It was ancient. It sounded like it came from the dawn of time. And then, I said to Norman, my voice barely a whisper, it answered itself. "What do you mean?" From another ridge, farther to the west, a second call came back. The same sound, the same power. They were communicating. We were between them. We had walked right into the middle of their territory. The keyboard clicks resumed, faster this time. And what happened next? What happened next, I said, my voice trembling, was the sound of something breaking through the trees. Something immense. It wasn't running. It was walking. And it was coming straight for us. The sound was of pure, unstoppable momentum. It wasn't the sound of an animal moving through the undergrowth. It was the sound of the undergrowth ceasing to exist. Thick branches snapped like toothpicks. Small trees were pushed aside, their roots tearing from the earth with a wet, ripping sound. Each footfall was a heavy, solid thud that I felt in my bones. It was methodical, unhurried. It knew we were there. It knew we weren't going anywhere. "We have to move," I hissed at Jack, but my own feet were glued to the ground. Jack made a sound, a thin, whimpering noise from the back of his throat. He raised his revolver with both hands, but they were shaking so violently the barrel was drawing wild circles in the air. His face in the fading light had gone a waxy, bloodless white. His eyes were fixed on the wall of trees ahead of us, wide with a terror so absolute it was barely human. "Don't shoot," I said, my voice a dry croak. "For God's sake, Jack, don't shoot." I wasn't thinking about provoking it. I was thinking that the sound of a gunshot would be a pathetic pop gun against the scale of this thing. An insult. The heavy footsteps stopped, maybe 50 yards away. The silence that fell was worse than the noise had been. It was a listening silence, a waiting silence. The musky smell was overpowering now, a suffocating blanket of wet fur and rot, and something ancient, like the smell of a cave that hasn't seen sunlight in 1,000 years. I slowly, carefully, began to draw my own weapon. My hand felt clumsy, my fingers like sausages. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a trapped bird trying to break free. And then I saw it. It wasn't clear at first, I told Norman, my voice dropping to a whisper in the confines of my garage. It was just a shape, a patch of darkness that was darker than the other shadows. It was standing between two massive Douglas firs, and it was tall, impossibly tall. The keyboard on Norman's end was silent. It stepped forward into a patch of dappled light filtering through the canopy, and my brain just stopped working. It couldn't process what I was seeing. It was shaped like a man, but it wasn't a man. It was covered in long matted hair, the color of dark earth and old rust. Its arms were too long, hanging down almost to its knees. Its shoulders were immense, a solid wall of muscle. But it was the face. I only saw it for a second. It was flat, the nose broad. The eyes were deep-set, black and intelligent. There was no malice in them, just a deep, weary observation. It looked at us like we were something strange and fleeting that had wandered into its world. I heard a gasp beside me. I tore my eyes away from the creature and looked at Jack. He was still standing, his gun still raised, but his eyes were no longer focused. They were wide and staring, but they weren't seeing the creature. They were seeing nothing at all. A thin line of spittle trickled from the corner of his mouth. "Jack?" I whispered. He didn't respond. His body swayed for a moment, like a tree in a light wind. And then, with no sound at all, he collapsed. He fell straight backward, stiff as a board, his head hitting a moss-covered rock with a dull, sickening thud. His revolver clattered onto the carpet of pine needles. The creature in the trees shifted its weight. It let out a low sound, that same deep rumble from before, but this time it was quiet, questioning. It took another step forward. "He was gone," I said to Norman, the words tasting like poison. I knew it the second he hit the ground, his heart. It just gave out, the sheer terror of it. His body couldn't take it. He was 24 years old, with a wife and a baby on the way, and he died of fright. Because of me. Because I didn't listen to him. Because I pushed us forward. I stopped, choking on the guilt that had been my constant companion for 30 years. I waited for Norman to say something, to offer a word of comfort or judgment. He did neither. "What did you do then, Charles?" he asked, his voice exactly the same as before, steady, clinical. I took a shaky breath. "I ran," I confessed. The two words were the heaviest things I had ever lifted. I didn't check on him, I didn't try to help him. I saw that thing take another step towards us, and a switch flipped in my brain. The veteran ranger, the man of duty and protocol, he just vanished. All that was left was an animal, a terrified animal. I turned and I ran. I ran without looking back. I ran through the brush, branches whipping at my face, my lungs burning. I didn't hear it chasing me. I didn't hear anything but the blood pounding in my ears and my own ragged, panicked breaths. I ran until I stumbled and fell, my face plowing into the damp earth. I lay there for a long time, sobbing, waiting for it to find me. But it never did. When I finally got the courage to get up, it was full dark. I made my way back, slowly, calling his name. But I knew it was useless. I found him right where he'd fallen. The creature was gone. There was no sign it had ever been there, except for the lingering smell in the air and the impossible tracks by the creek. And Jack, he was just lying there, his eyes open to the stars, his hat with the picture of his wife still on his head. I lied on the official report, I told Norman, the confession pouring out of me now. I said we got separated in the falling darkness. I said I found him the next morning. I said it looked like a massive coronary. The coroner agreed. A heart attack brought on by overexertion at altitude. No one ever questioned it. I let them believe he died alone. I never told his wife the truth. I never told anyone, until you. The line was silent for a long time. The only sound was the hum of the old refrigerator in the corner of my garage. For a wild moment I thought he had hung up. Then I heard the soft click-clack of his keyboard. "The creature," Norman said, his voice cutting through my haze of memory. "When it made the low rumbling sound after Ranger Jack fell, did you perceive it as a threat?" The question was so bizarre, so detached from the horror of the moment, that it stunned me into silence. "No," I said finally, the realization hitting me for the first time in 3 decades. No, it wasn't a threat. It sounded confused. The keyboard started clicking again, a steady rhythmic sound that seemed to measure out the last 30 years of my silence. "Confusion," Norman repeated, his voice the same flat monotone. "Can you describe the physical posture that accompanied this sound? Was it aggressive? Defensive?" I tried to picture it again, to strip away the terror and just see the animal, the shape between the trees. "It wasn't either," I said slowly. "It had just tilted its head, like a dog hearing a strange noise. When Jack fell, it made that sound and took a step, and its hands, they weren't claws, they were open. It was reaching maybe, or just balancing. It was just looking at him on the ground, then at me. It was curiosity." The word felt strange on my tongue. For 3 decades I had painted that moment in my mind with the colors of pure menace. But it wasn't true. The real monster in that memory wasn't the creature. It was my fear. It was my guilt. "Interesting," Norman said. The word was completely devoid of interest. It was a label for a file. So the sequence is as follows. Vocalization 1, Vocalization 2 in response approach, visual contact, Ranger Jack collapses, creature emits low vocalization and shifts posture. You retreat. Is that an accurate summary? "Yes," I whispered. Hearing my life's greatest trauma reduced to a series of bullet points was strangely numbing. "And you had no further contact? It did not pursue you?" "No, it let me go." I thought about that for a moment. It could have caught me easily. I was a panicked man crashing through the woods. It was a force of nature that had pushed trees aside. It had let me go. Maybe it never had any intention of hurting us at all. Maybe we were the intruders in its home, and our sudden fragile collapse was just a confusing, sad thing to witness. "Very well," Norman said. The keyboard clicking stopped. "Charles, this has been a highly valuable account. Your willingness to correct the initial report provides a much clearer picture. The addition of a second observer, and the fatal physiological reaction, is a significant data point. I appreciate your candor." I didn't know what to say. I had just confessed to cowardice and a 30-year lie that had dishonored the memory of a good young man. He was thanking me for the data. What happens now?" I asked. "I will add your testimony to the database. It will be cross-referenced with other Class 3 encounters in the same region. Your identity will remain anonymous, of course. File C1138. That's all. That's all. 3 decades of a secret that had hollowed me out, and it ended with a file number. Thank you for your time, Charles," Norman said, and before I could respond, the line went dead. The sudden silence in the garage was deafening. It was a heavy, thick silence, just like the one in the forest that day. My phone was just a black rectangle on the workbench. The call was over. It was done. I sat there for a long time, not moving, just breathing in the cool air that smelled of gasoline and sawdust. I expected to feel something. Relief, maybe. Lightness. But I didn't. The weight was still there. It hadn't vanished. It had just shifted. It was no longer a secret I was hiding from the world, but a truth I now had to live with out in the open, even if only for myself. I stood up and walked over to an old steel locker in the corner. My fingers fumbled with the latch before it swung open with a rusty groan. Inside, hanging on a hook, was my old Ranger jacket. The fabric was faded, the leather on the shoulders cracked with age. I reached into the inner pocket. My fingers closed around a small rectangular shape. I pulled it out. It was a photograph, its edges softened from years of being carried. It was the picture Jack had shown me that morning. Him and his wife smiling on their wedding day. She was beautiful, and he looked so young, so full of a future, that I had watched get stolen from him. "She's expecting our first," he'd said. I later found out it was a girl. They named her Jacqueline. I sent money every year on her birthday anonymously through a lawyer. I told myself it was for a scholarship fund. It was penance. I looked at the photo, at Jack's happy, trusting face. For 30 years, I had told myself a story where I was a victim too, a survivor of a terrifying ordeal. But that wasn't the whole truth. I was also the senior officer who ignored the warnings, the veteran who dismissed the instincts of his rookie, the man who ran. I hadn't just run from the creature. I had run from Jack. I had left him there. Closing my eyes, I didn't see the monster from the woods. I saw a young man's face, pale in the fading light, his eyes wide with a terror he shouldn't have had to face alone. I put the photo back in the jacket pocket and closed the locker door. The story was told. The file was closed. But for me, the forest would always be quiet, and I would always hear that sound. Not of a monster roaring, but of something ancient and lonely, watching a small, fragile life go out, and wondering why. The guilt hadn't gone away, but for the first time it felt like my own, and I knew I would carry it, not as a secret, but as a memory, the memory of Jack.